for the takeoff on the night flight, right here on IUM Radio 94.5 FM. Join us from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. for an exciting journey that will take you soaring through music, laughter, and lively discussions. Whether you're commuting home or unwinding after a long day, we've got your perfect travel playlist ready to fuel your vibe. Dive into interactive segments that keep you engaged and connected with your community. So buckle up and get ready to experience a flight full of fun, insights, and amazing tunes that will land you right in the heart of Namibian culture. Don't miss your boarding call. Tune in to the takeoff, where the journey is just as exciting as...
Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to IUM Radio 94.5 FM. This is your Captain Lloyd that is keeping you company all the way up until the hour of 11 o'clock. Now I'd like to welcome you, that is, to a special edition, that is the Ascension Day edition, right here in studio at this wonderful segment, which is the Change Maker segment. Now if you're listening and you're wondering as to what is this segment all about, well, this is that segment where we bring in studio that as guests, experts, and indeed people and individuals making that is impactful and great change both in their community and as well as far and beyond. Now tonight we're discussing that is under the theme of faith, mental health, and as well as a journey that is of healing, and we want to open up that is a soulful, deep conversation. You see, we live in a world where, as in the world of pressure, pain, and uncertainty, and many tend to that as faith, spirituality, and even cultural tradition to find strength, peace, and purpose. But now, how do we balance that is what we believe with what we feel? How do we find healing in prayer, purpose in pain, and stillness in the storm? Well, tonight I'm joined that is by a special guest that is Mr. Anton Gabwe, an author, public speaker, pastor, trainer, film writer and director, and as well as producer, and as well as a great man that I've known and that I've seen from his works, that is both in action and as well as on paper. Now, as we dive into this conversation, you definitely would want to that is stay in tech and stay that is with us, because the conversation is about to get interesting. Good evening, Mr. Anton, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Lloyd. It's a blessing and it's a privilege to be here with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's great to have you in studio, especially on such a topic that is very important as we discuss Ascension Day.
Yes.
But before we get into the conversation, what comes to your mind when you hear the word Ascension Day?
Basically, when you're talking about ascension, you're talking about, you can't speak about ascension without speaking about resurrection, without speaking about power. Because when you're speaking about ascension, you're actually saying Jesus sitting at the right hand of God, and it's also a concept where he sends the Holy Spirit. So without ascension, there will be no Holy Spirit, and without resurrection, there will be no ascension. So ascension is vital, because that is the process which Jesus says, I need to go to the Father so that you'll be able to receive the Holy Spirit. And when he gets there, he sits at the right hand of God and is able to intercede on our behalf. So that's how vital ascension is.
Wonderful. I love how you unpacked it. I think that takes it from both a biblical aspect, and if you definitely did not know what Ascension Day is all about, well, I hope you now have an idea and as well as a depth reach. Now, while we go to the conversation, Mr. Anthony,
yes,
how would you describe, the connection between faith or spirituality with mental health in our communities?
It's very vital to understand that scientifically proven, psychological and spiritual, is that a man sits, or a man's life is on the Trinity, body, soul and spirit. So when you speak about body, soul and spirit, the soul aspect of a man is where the psychology happens. That's where the mind is, that's where the self-will is, and that's where the emotion is. So the soul actually is an embodiment of a three elements. That is mind, self-will, and then that's where emotions are. And then you have the spirit, and then you have the body. So a man cannot exist. This is proven across board, holistically, psychology, scientifically, as well as spiritual people, that you have got body, soul, and spirit. And therefore, it's very imperative to be able to understand that for you to be balanced, there is a spiritual aspect of you, and then there's a psychological aspect, and then there's a physical aspect. So that brings us to the center to where we are now. It brings us to a point where we understand that if we're going to be going into the mental health, we are speaking about the soul. And then we are talking about how does it link to spirituality. So body, soul, and spirit, and they're inseparable. The day the three separate, it means you're in the coffin, you're dead.
I love how you bring that in. The day that these three are separated, it means you are either 6 feet underneath the ground as the body. Now, while you spoke about that, I'm brought to a concept, or my mind ponders on the thought that, you know what, we all struggle with emotions at times. We are human beings. You see, in times of emotions, a lot of things happen. Now, I'd like to hear from you. What role can prayer or spirituality, rituals play in bringing that is peace and clarity? Because you get to hear people tell you that, you know what, I was even once told this, that I was going through something, an emotional breakdown, and a friend of mine was like, just pray. And I was like, I didn't understand what does it do. Now I'd like to hear from you. What role does prayer, spirituality play in terms of bringing peace and stability in such a case?
So it's very important, as we have laid the foundation of this discussion. The challenge is sometimes when you're dealing with mental health is, when it comes to religion, is the misinterpretation of scriptures. For those of us who are into theology, you would understand the balance. So let me take one example. Jesus finds somebody who's blind, and then he takes dust, he takes soil from the ground, and then he spits saliva into the soil and he rubs into his eyes, and then he says, go and wash your face. Now, why does Jesus not just pray for him and his eyes are open? But he takes something from the dust and he rubs into his eyes. Of course, he needed to have faith, and he got well. So now, when you are giving that example, you are bringing balance. That there are certain things that are just going to require prayer, and they happen. And then there are certain things that some level of tangible substance is going to be required for you to be able to be healed. So you need to have a balance to understand the process throughout the Bible. You would find that God would use physical things. I'll give an example. Another example is the community was cursed, and the water was cursed and people were dying. And this prophet comes, Elisha, and said, bring salt. And he purifies the water with salt. So I'm trying to give these examples that in order to look at holistic scripture, you need to understand the balance. Why didn't he just say stand there and just, okay, I'm going to pray for the water and the land and everything will be... No. He understood there's a certain element that needs to touch the ground in order for this process to happen. Now, coming back, so I needed to lay that foundation as we're building this case. So we're coming back, prayer. Psychologists have proven that, you can Google it, that prayer actually helps with your mental health. First, the primary definition, they would say prayer is a communication between you and God. So first, as you are projecting your prayers, is also a form of releasing. You can come to, you look at a lot of people who are depressed in the Bible. Job, he lost everything, lost his kids and lost his wealth, and eventually, just like in our days, you have no money, the woman will eventually leave. I'm just saying, it's in the Bible. Okay, so the woman left. So now, the conversation starts between him and God. He'll be like, and it was this, and which you would call prayer. But there's a conversation throughout the book of Job, back and forth, and he's in a mental broken down. And not only mental broken down, this guy is like being insulted by the friends, being humiliated. Maybe you have sinned, maybe there's a curse in your family, just the old stuff you were talking about. So they were throwing all kind of things on him, and he's going through that process. Now, the communication between him and God, this is now prayer. it begins to give him some sense of stability.
Yes.
It begins to give him some sense of hope, some sense of renewal in his mental process. And remember, we already laid the foundation. You need to begin to learn the distinction. Now, he is going through that, and he's talking to God, releasing all the anger. And if you read the book of Job, there are these things that this man has questions. Why has this happened to me? Where have you been? Why is the evil? All this, and it's a good thing because it's coming out.
Yes.
You need to have a channel of release when you're dealing with depression and mental health.
Sure.
And the problem is that the church and the community haven't allowed much channels of release. They are not channels, especially for men. I know women, they have all kind of things. It's very few. When you look at the last statistics, about 600 suicide and 100 were women, 500 were men. So with women, there's a little bit better platforms to release themselves, their emotions. But for men, it's a little bit difficult because our society hasn't created, even the church, it actually hasn't created that platform to find a balance. So prayer is very imperative. It's vital, but you need to be able to put it in the context. You need to be able to put in the context as we're building there.
Nice.
Another perspective I would put you, God was the first one to do counseling. And when I was learning to do counseling, this was amazing when you're looking at the Bible, psychological counseling, social work, and all those things. And then us who are into all spheres,
Yes.
from the psychology as well as from the spiritual point of view, you need to do cross-cutting. Now, when you're doing cross-cutting, you're going to discover that God is the first counselor. So this guy, Abel and Cain, they are going through a moment. And God senses that something is going to happen to Cain. And he goes to him and says, I sense that your spirit, your emotions, your stability is not good. And you need to find a way to release it. If that's a better word I can use.
Yeah.
He says you need to find a way to release it. In other words, you need to find a way to master those or put those self-control emotions. And he says if you don't, it will overtake you and it will destroy you.
I think while you're just speaking on that point, I'd like to bring this concept in. How do we find balance between trusting in faith and seeking for help like therapy and counseling? You're speaking from a counselor from both perspectives, as a pastor, as well as one that has gone and studied psychology. Now, you see, we live in a world where as in one either turns a blind eye and says that, no, I'd rather go and pray about it because I'm Christian. Or someone says that, let me go for therapy. And there is still that back and forth clash. How do you get to find that balance?
Thank you. And I was getting to that point. I just wanted to use the Cain and Abel story to lay the foundation, the importance of counseling. So God lays the foundation of what counseling is. You have a problem, let's have a conversation.
Yes.
He gives him that platform. The guy refuses to give in, and then eventually comes back again for another session. Be like, God, can we have this conversation? I see this bad thing is going to happen if you don't control yourself. Cain refuses, eventually kills his brother.
Sure.
But this is emotions now. God still comes back for another counseling session. And he says, what have you done? Where is your brother? Again, he's still not willing, but there is a conversation. Now, I wanted to lay that as the foundation, and there are so many stories I would lay, the balance between faith, prayer, and seeking counseling. Throughout scriptures, it speaks about speak to your brother, go to your sister, go and to the elders, go to somebody. Throughout, in any problem, it will advise you that you need to go to someone. Now, it doesn't necessarily all stop with the pastor.
Yes.
Because there are certain things that your pastors might be qualified in spiritual matters.
Yes.
But remember, body, soul, and spirit. So you are dealing with the psychology part. So he can help you on the spiritual aspect, but he won't be able to help you on the psychological part, which is the soul part. So, and then you have the physical part. So you need a balance. You need a balance. Now, throughout, it's very imperative to draw the distinction that all problems don't have one answer. Having that wisdom is very important. And that's where sometimes Christian community miss it. They think everything shall be answered by prayer. That's why my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So you need to understand which principles applies for what. If there's a need for you to seek psychological therapy in that area, even if you pray, if the principle says this is psychological, that needs psychological help, prayer won't do it.
Sure.
I've seen, I'm a counselor, I'm a pastor. I have seen devastation to even pastors and leaders who are into spiritual environment and they are burnt out. And their life and what they do when they're burnt out is unthinkable. And they don't. Right as I'm seated, I've been into this work for 20 years. I have about 3 counselors that when I'm feeling like I'm burned out, I go to. Yet I have thousands of people I counsel myself.
Yes.
So as a pastor, as a counselor, so it's very imperative to find principles to know which one works where. And throughout, if you want to use the Bible, I can give you that. If you want to, so it's a problem. The other problem, let me just, before you jump into another one, demonology. So you have faith, you have certain people thinking that depression is a demon. That's another thing there.
Yeah,
that's another problem there.
So most of the time.
Yeah, so people begin to think either you are weak, you're what, you have a spirit of timidity, you have, they begin to, there's a danger when you classify everything into demonology. So it's very important. People are dying, even themselves who are praying for you are dying because principles, they are body, soul, and spirit. I'll keep reminding again. The soul is the psychological aspect.
Yes.
And then you have the spirit that connected to the Holy Spirit. And then you have the body, which is the physical aspect. So every element needs its own principles that you apply to it in order for you to be healed and for you to succeed in that area. So if it's a principle that needs the psychological help, do not just put a canvas of spirituality to it. It's a danger zone. And I would also appeal to whoever is listening, whether it's church leaders and whatever, we are appealing now that there's a vital element that you need to have a balance in your church communities, the spiritual aspect as much as the psychological aspect. Not all depression, because again, if you're going to say all depression is demons, what about all the great people in the Bible who were depressed, including Jesus himself? Because when Jesus is in the Gethsemane and is bleeding blood, in psychology there's a term we use for that. It's a psychological processes going through where his emotions is battling with his mind. And in psychology you say you begin to bleed blood. So many haven't even been taught the scientific implication of Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus is bleeding. He's conflicted. That's the highest form of depression. And again, he comes back to God. God, why have you forsaken me? So even himself is in that state. That bleeding blood or sweating blood, it was a form of depression. If you Google it, it will actually give you proper terms, which are psychological terms, emotions, crashing, and this is, I want to say it very slow. Depression is a conflict between expectation and experience.
Sure.
Depression is a conflict between expectation and experience. So you are moving. I'm a young guy, I've graduated, I've gone to school, and my expectation is to get a job. And my experience is contradicting my expectation. then depression kicks in.
Come on now,
so
somebody.
there is a battle inside you between expectation and experience. And somebody has to come into your life and help you to decipher that and break it down and say, my dear, let's put the elements together. And let's put the pieces together. This is what you're expecting, we understand, and this is what you're experiencing. Right now, we are going to put the pieces and take one step at a time, breathe. That is what people are going through.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think you've just actually dissected a lot of nuggets, but I wouldn't say nuggets. You just served us with a whole menu. I don't want to already run off that as to dessert. I want us to still touch a little bit on the main meal of tonight. Do you believe that purpose is guided more by God or your ancestors? Or is it your own choices that you take? And why would you say so?
Okay. So then there's this kind of a very deep question. So every person, depending on their belief system, they would answer that question based on their foundational values. So foundational values is your foundation philosophy, what you believe in, how you are brought in. I am coming from a Christian perspective, so my answer won't be psychological, won't be philosophical. It will be it will be centered on spirituality. So in spirituality, we are saying that God is the foundation of purpose. I knew you before you were born, and I formed you. I created you for a purpose. And when God, before you came into the earth, there was a problem, and God created you to solve that problem, and part of your purpose is solving that problem. Now, when you are going a bit further to say, what is the foundation of purpose? It's not ancestral, because God says, I knew you before your mother ever conceived you. So it means you can't even be connected to your ancestors. God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. He's all-knowing. He has been there before the foundations of the earth. So if we drive it from spirituality, we say that purpose is founded in God.
Yes.
And once you are founded in God, let me quote my favorite verse, Romans 8:28. For we know all things works together for good, for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. So we have been called to fulfill a purpose. So God, who created us, is the foundation of that purpose. Now, your parents and our community, they have a role they play in guiding us towards our purpose. They don't detect, they can't determine, they just guide you into that direction. That's basically the purpose of a mother and a father. Is they bring you into this world, they don't own you, and they are stewards. They just have to guide you into your purpose.
Yes.
And that's so we can't, our ancestors will be limited, because let me give you an example. Your ancestors grew up in the bush, and then your purpose is to invent a computer. How are they going to know that? They'll be far distance from what your purpose is. Therefore, they will not be having enough capacity to guide your purpose. So your purpose must be founded and be guided by something bigger and greater than ancestors, because your ancestors will be limited. The 1900s, the 1800s, they can't be associated to the purpose you have today with technology.
Yes.
So you need something higher that is infinite. I'm just going to be very slow to announce that. You need something higher that is infinite, that you need to attach yourself to define it.
Yeah.
Because if you define yourself, and I'm still in the purpose, you define yourself to anything. You can't define yourself by your job position. You can't define yourself by your degree. You can't define yourself by your talent or anything.
Yeah.
So, you just mentioned what I do. If I had to define myself based on titles, all the other greater works that I'm capable, that God has deposited in me, will be limited and will never be done if I am confined to either a human being or an entity or anything smaller than God.
Yes.
So, trust me, if I have to define myself based on my ancestors, I wouldn't be even in this studio.
Sure.
Because my ancestors were in the village. I'm supposed to be in the village somewhere seated.
But I think while we're there, before we divert to the conversation, I'd like to hear this. I'd like to hear your take and your view on this.
Yes.
In your daily life, how do you incorporate that as faith as well as cultural belief to influence how you handle stress, relationships, and as well as setbacks?
Thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd, for that question. How do I guide myself, the cross-cutting culture, faith, in relation to relationships, mental health, and personal growth?
Yeah.
Again, I'll just go back, and it was good that I defined that earlier. I'm a holistic person. Ubuntu, you are a human being because of other human beings. I am because you are. You are because I am. And growing up, when God was training me in what I'll become, this was an amazing voice in my 20s. And he says to me, I didn't know that back then that it's related to Ubuntu. He says, Tony, I am greater because there is Lloyd to listen to me. And Lloyd will be greater in the work you're doing to interview me because there is Tony to speak. Our greatness is never in isolation. You need to be in the presence of another person, either an audience as a listener or you as a listener to a speaker, for you to be great. Both are defining each other in that moment.
Yes.
Now, I'm bringing it closer. I'm not far. How do I do cross-cutting? So all these elements are inseparable. They are very, very central to each other. So when you speak about culture, you are speaking about your belief system. You are speaking about your values. You are speaking about the way of life. And your culture, your belief system is direct or indirectly influenced by faith.
Yeah.
And faith is the foundation of knowledge. Faith is a foundation of knowledge. So culture, I don't want to go deeper into your radio station. So culture is fluid. Culture is currency. It flows. So as you grow in every day to day, you find that your values are developing, your knowledge is developing. So what you call culture then it will be evolving. I need to find myself in Europe. I would have to be effective in Europe, and the culture there, what I believe, my belief system must be able to align me to any culture to say, I still stick. My faith and my belief system are the foundation that actually determines what culture is around me. And also, in any form of culture, now if you want to break it down, when you go to tradition,
Yes.
any form of culture for me will be evaluated already by my faith and my values. So what I pick from any culture has to be influenced. Now, once I have those, in my relationship, I use the principles of culture. Ubuntu, love your neighbors, you love yourself. Do unto others. Any African community, you're going to find these principles across board. So, love, a child is raised by the village. Do unto others as you'd love them to do unto you. Treat others with love and respect. So that bring it to mental health.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I need to treat myself mentally, spiritually, holistically. In a sense, what I treat myself, how I care for myself, is a mirror in what I'm going to give to the next person. So, caring for my mental health seeking, talking to somebody, having a form of therapy, purifying my soul, body, and spirit within my values and belief system becomes a very, very vital that I will be able to contribute to the next person. So these are how I use cultures, spirituality, and faith in myself and in others.
Wonderful. Mr. Anthony, as we come, that is, to a close of this great interview. I know we don't have much time, but I'll definitely will look forward, that is, to bringing you back, that is, in studio, so that we can unpack these great discussions. Now, as we come to a close, what message of hope can you share with someone listening who feels like they are losing, that is, both their faith and peace of mind?
I want to encourage somebody out there, whatever form you are listening to, and understand that I came up to this conclusion that if God has given you a breath, you wake up in the morning, you see the sunrise, you are sleeping in your bed tonight and you're still breathing, you are in the car moving, you are wherever you find yourself and you are listening to this sound, the heartbeat you have is the full proof and evidence that God has something better for you. And this is, sometimes I just woke up to God. I said, God, thank you for the breath of life, but just provide what I need to do today. Because if He has given you the breath of life and you're in the sound of the mind, whatever you are going through, you are in any form of depression, anxiety, worried about anything, take a breath, pray, and find somebody to talk to. Take a breath, pray, and find somebody to talk to. Remember, spiritual, psychological, and physical. You need all three to be balanced. Pray, spiritual, talk to somebody. It helps your mental psychology to release. Breathe, relax, that helps your body. It's very, very imperative. There is a greatness ahead of you. As long as you're breathing, God can't give you life without blessings ahead. Just find a way and you will get all things back together. That will be my word for tonight.
Thank you very much. That is Mr. Anthony. There you had it, ladies and gentlemen. Breathe, pray, breathe, take a breath. And remember, that is your alignment, because God is definitely, that is, always there listening and just ready to help you. That brings us, that is, to a close of this wonderful discussion. As we wrap up, that is this powerful Ascension Day edition. Now remember this, healing is not a straight path, it is a spiritual one. So whether it's finding comfort in God, guidance that is from ancestors, or strength in quiet reflection, your journey matters. Keep asking questions, keep seeking peace, and most of all, don't be afraid to speak the truth. This is 94.5 FM. Stay tuned as we go on a musical break.